Welcome to the Dynasty Evaluation Show. I'm John McGlynn, John McGlynn 75 on the X Machine. Today we have a special guest. We get to talk about some the best picks per round, who was the best pick, who we feel was the best pick per round per team for NFL football wise, and then we'll talk about best landing spots for fantasy: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and then worst landing spots: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end for fantasy purposes. So nice little show today. We got to pick some brains with some pretty smart people, so let's get this show started. So I went to the draft last year. I was supposed to go to draft with JT. I got to my daughter's prom was scheduled on Saturday afternoon, so the entire weekend was kind of like, I can't miss my daughter, so I got to take the 17-second picture with my daughter. You know, that's the memories last forever. Here we go. But he went to KC by himself this year. JT had stuff going on. He couldn't make the draft this year by myself. So I brought my wife, who took place with JT. Didn't know as much as JT as far as football is concerned, but you know, she had a good time having some beers and eating some food and trying M&M's, Mom Spaghetti, and all the other places like that. We tried. We had a Coney Island dog. We had some Detroit style pizza, which I love the crust of Detroit style pizza. If you guys never had it before, there's a Jets by us. That's about the closest we can get. But they had a couple other places we tried. So the food was good. Everything was good. JT, what'd you do?
I worked all weekend and I was watching the draft the whole time pretty much, and was writing articles like at day 1, 2, 3 recaps with a big group of guys from DLF. So we had a big article. We kind of all threw our thoughts in there, and so was kind of doing that the whole weekend. So I missed hanging out with you, but I had to work all weekend. And the one good thing about actually sitting there at work watching it is a little easier to pull all the information in when you're not at the draft with a million people running around. As that crowd was wild, man, almost 800,000 people in town just for the draft. More people than actually live in Detroit. So when you're doubling up the amount of people that live in Detroit, that's a pretty crazy event.
Yeah, they did not have enough bathrooms. They did not have enough food in some of the tents. They ran out the day one. So I always try to get like an NFL hat, something like that, some kind of memorabilia. They ran out of stuff before we even got into draft day one. I was like, come on, man. Like, you can't prepare for – you knew there's going to be like, a couple thousand people anyway. But anyway, it is what it is. I went to both in Chicago. It was work right across the street from my work. The one in Tennessee was awesome. But this one was I'll say this one was not as good as the other ones. It was you couldn't really see much. The experience wasn't as much as I've had to pass. We're looking forward to Green Bay next year. I'll definitely be there for that one. Now, you and JT will definitely get it done. But you got a special guest today. I mean, you guys, he's all over Twitter. No introduction needed here. But Matt Waldman, tell us all about yourself, where everybody can find you, all the stuff you do.
Sure. I mean, I've been writing about football since 2003. You can find the Rookie Scouting Portfolio at mattwaldman.com. The Rookie Scouting Portfolio is it's a 19-year-old publication. I do it every year. It comes out April 1st, and then there's a post-draft that comes out later this week, usually within a week of the NFL draft. And it is one of the 2 most purchased draft guides for cross-checking purposes by NFL scouts, according to people like Alex Brown, who's a recruiter at Ole Miss, who was a recruiting director at SMU, and meet with these guys on a weekly basis so he knows what they get. I contribute scouting reports to Will Hewlett, who's the quarterback coach for Anthony Richardson, Brock Purdy, and Caleb Williams. Him and Tom Gormley, who's the biomechanics guy that was featured on ESPN before the draft with those guys. So I give you both a fantasy and a reality-based perspective on quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. I have a YouTube channel that's probably well over a decade old. It's got over 800 videos on it where I break down tape of those players. You can find me on X at Matt Waldman, and I provide breakdowns there too. And I'm a senior staff writer of Football Guys. So if you want the fantasy stuff that I've been writing since 2003, my gut check column's been going on that long. So that's a little bit about myself.
JT and I both played. We both coached. We both, so not that we're like tape connoisseurs, as far as that goes, but I think we get a lot more out of watching tape and watching film breakdown. And when we watch your tapes, when I watch your tapes anyway, like I love when you stop fast forward, stop, rewind, explain the play, what's going on, because a lot of people, like, they'll just look at the way he caught this. It's about the beginning of the play. It's about, has the play progressed? It's about what he did, the actions of how he got to the situation that loves us the most as people who coach and played. I want to know, like, when did the hole open up? If the hole did not open up, what did he do to adjust? If the quarterback didn't hit his first read, how do I know he didn't hit his first read? What was he looking at? Where was his head at? Why did him? All the intangibles that you can't find in a spreadsheet, all the things like that. Matt, you have no idea how important that stuff is to, like, us watching film and seeing how, I think receivers are, as a JT played running back, I played offensive line, so we both have different aspects, different visions anyway, but kind of the same. But sometimes it's more for me to watch receivers on your tape is more important for me, because we already know about what the line's supposed to do. I already know on zone blocking, on read block, and all kind of different setups, like what running backs are supposed to do. Quarterbacks, if I know the guy's turning in, turning on, I'm looking at zone or man coverage. I know all this stuff, but just hearing the breakdown of the wide receivers is more important for me than any other position. So I really appreciate all the work you do and the time you put into it.
Well, I appreciate it. And you guys are my people, because I mean, that's the way I look at it, is the same thing, is that really it's about the process and not the results.
Yes.
If the process is good or bad, then and you project that process to the NFL, then the results either will come or they'll struggle to get there. And that tends to be the case so often when you look at players that may light up a stat sheet or a box score in college, but they're doing it in a way that the process doesn't carry over to the NFL. And so, the things that I start, I mean, I know there's a generation of folks that some of them don't like that. But I tell them there's plenty of other places they can go if they would like to just get a clean, artistic looking, cartoonish version of what's happening. I don't mean cartoonish in a bad way, but just showing highlights and it's pretty and aesthetically pleasing. I'm trying to educate. And if you're not into the educational background part of it, that's okay. There are people that are, and you guys are one of them, and I appreciate that.
I call it watching the fireworks is what I call it. Like, you don't know about lighting the fuse or watching, where it's sitting at or what kind of tube it is or what size, ball it is that's blowing up and it goes up in the air. They just watch the fireworks. That's kind of like, wow, I saw this play. Like, there's so much more that goes into a play than just somebody being 10 yards deep, wide open, or a quarterback hitting some guy or throwing the wrong ball. You can see that he's supposed to be, he ran the wrong route, or, breaking down that kind of stuff is just awesome for us.
Yeah, I mean, Darren McFadden was a fireworks player at Indiana. You'd watch him against Ohio State, and he had a few nice fireworks displays. But when you look at the process, you go, I'm not sure he's going to be able to light that fuse as often as he'd like to, unless they put him in a specific type of scheme. And even then, they're going to have to light. They're going to probably go through a book of matches before they get that rocket fired.
Yes, absolutely. So today we got some, what we're going to do is we're going to go around and, first of all, start, who do you think was the best first round pick as far as fantasy is concerned? Offensive side of the ball, who made out like a bandit getting drafted somewhere that you think that, like, man, this is just, if I was to put the star, shape in the star shape and put it right in the bucket, couldn't land in a better spot, who was the best first round pick as far as NFL teams are concerned? Who got their guy? Didn't have to trade up too much. Just man, it just worked out for him.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious. I'm going to give you a quick obvious answer, but I'm going to take the least obvious answer. Really, like the most obvious answer people are is to me Caleb Williams. In terms of, they got their quarterback. And I think they have a guy who's fairly childproof in terms of like what the coaching staff could do to mess this up. But really, the guy that I want to highlight maybe is a little different than what you're asking, but I think it still fits in there because the uproar about this guy cracks me up because I think it's completely the opposite of what public opinion is, and that's Michael Penix Jr. Most people are like, this is the worst pick ever in the first round. And let's just talk about, let's separate the evaluation of Michael Penix for a minute and just say, the Falcons took a quarterback they like. Forget Michael Penix. Just wipe it from your mind, everybody listening, and say Falcons took a quarterback they liked, even though they're paying Kirk Cousins over $100 million on a 4-year deal. First of all, it's really a 2-year deal with an out in the 3rd year where they can renegotiate or get rid of this guy if they want to. He's going to be 36 years old. While he was shooting his mouth off, telling people that he was disappointed initially by the pick and felt like they could help themselves a little bit better for right now by taking something else, another pick, and making the most of it to help him win right now. He's also saying that he can't run anything other at full speed in a straight line. While we all expect that he'll be able to run and break a pocket and work outside by training camp. He said he can't do that right now and said specifically that he can't. And at being 36, it's different than being 24 and having an Achilles injury. So, and let's remember that Michael Penix, if he's 28, which was one of the other arguments, by the time they figure out whether he's good or not, well, guess what? Kirk Cousins was 27 before they figured out whether he was any good or not or worthwhile. Steve Young was 31. Drew Brees was 27. So he's going to get some intermittent playing time, which is really the best way for guys to get opportunities. If you look at quarterbacks, if in the first round being drafted, 2 out of 3 don't hit. And that means that you're going to spend 6 to 8 years if you don't hit on 2 quarterbacks in a row. Look at the Tennessee Titans since Steve McNair. Because we're not going to, since Steve McNair, Vince Young, Marcus Mariota, Malik Willis. We could talk about Ryan Tannehill as a stopgap, but we're talking about who they drafted. Malik Willis and Will Levis. And we're not sure any of them, or we're sure most of them weren't any good, and we're not sure about Will Levis at this stage. So you're talking about well over a decade being in the wasteland. And with Penix, if you put him on a plan like you have where the intermittent playing time, look at all the top quarterbacks who've been productive, MVP caliber, Pro Bowl caliber guys. Most of them, not most of them, but a good bit of them, if not maybe I'd say a majority of them, had some intermittent playing time, or they sat for much of their first year. Penix is probably going to get to do that. Everything that Atlanta has, if you look at last year, promising tight end, promising number 1 receiver, both guys that are good at vertical boundary routes, catching the ball, good, strong running game, good offensive line, promising points on defense that are going to develop, and they didn't have a quarterback, and that's why they're drafting where they were. If Kirk Cousins doesn't make it all the way back, has recurring issues that limit him or gets hurt again, they're in the same place they were before. The best teams and scouts know this. It's better to pick a quarterback when you already have a quarterback than it is to try and desperately put a quarterback into the fire who isn't experienced enough yet, and you don't have another one available. So for me, I thought this was a great long-term pick. And the people who are complaining about this, I think that they're just they have half-truth points, and they just may not really understand the dynamics of why it was a good pick as opposed to why they think it was a terrible one.
Yeah, people see the age already. They look at the stats. Oh, he's already 24 years old. They already have a quarterback there. Well, what's going on? Why? There's a lot of red flags in that decision they made to give people concern. But at the same time, and people who watch, maybe who didn't watch all of his tape going, throughout college, didn't have a ton of like great years, but just he made good decisions, but he got beat up so bad. And they're kind of, this guy can't take a beating. There was a lot of red flags that went in that decision. But the NFL teams know so much more than we do. They know what was going on here. It was just one of those things where the security of your franchise is more important than just a roll of dice and the hot takes or the thing. They knew exactly. It worked out for him. I'm 100% concerned it worked out for him.
Yeah, John, here's the other way of looking at it is there are certain players that take a beating and never recover and they get worse. Most guys that take a beating get worse. He took a beating and got better. Yeah. He wore pressure at Indiana like a second layer of skin and made good decisions while he was under pressure. He didn't throw a ton of interceptions. He placed the ball only where his receivers could make it. He didn't have great receivers at Indiana. Then he got to Washington And everybody acts like, well, Washington disguised how bad of a quarterback he actually is, when it's actually more of the fact that he elevated Washington's team. They have good players at Washington, but he helped elevate that. He made good decisions in the middle of the field. He's going to need to get better in that area. But every quarterback in college football is not the strongest in the middle of the field. That's the area where the NFL is going to be a little bit more complex for them to solve in terms of, reading leverage and understanding different coverage disguises and things like that. But what he's worked with, he's done well. And there are quarterbacks who were drafted in this draft who don't do well with what they're working with in the middle of the field. And they're getting a little bit of a pass. So, I look at this and you can't look at injuries and predict them with any certainty. I mean, there's a low percentage of recurrence with the injuries that he had. Matthew Stafford, let's look in Detroit. You were just in Detroit. Matthew Stafford, when he was in Detroit, had 2 ACL tears and a broken back and a pair of shoulder injuries. And then he went on to win a Super Bowl. So and everyone was talking after his first 3 years, oh, he's not durable enough. He's too tough for his own good. He's never going to last. How many years has Matthew Stafford played in the league right now? So, for me, Michael Penix, it may not be the best pick, but I think it's a far smarter pick and could turn out to be a contender for the best pick when everyone's basically shouting it down as the worst ever.
Yeah. JT, what do you think about who's your first round pick? Who's your best pick in round one?
The best pick for me is Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, he goes to 4, goes to Arizona, great spot. I thought Arizona or Los Angeles would be perfect spots for him where he could go in, immediately be the number 1 there. Man, if you have Kyler Murray, you're really happy because now this helps out Kyler Murray a lot. I like what the Cardinals did in the draft overall. I really like their drafts, and I like kind of where they're going on offense. So that excites me even more. He can go in there and be the number 1 guy. They already got a good quarterback, established quarterback in Kyler Murray, and now they're adding some other offensive weapons. McBride, hit at the end of last year. We thought maybe it'd be this year before he did. He did it a little earlier. We'll talk about going forward here, but I love the Trey Benson pick. Was one of my favorite picks, and I think if they could look and see who's still out there. There's not a ton of guys in free agency, but I think if they could add one more wideout in free agency, maybe a Tyler Boyd. Zay Jones just got dropped by the Jags today. I think a Tyler Boyd or Zay Jones would be nice little additions for not too expensive for them, just kind of help out that wide receiver crew a bit. I would love to see that. But I really liked Harrison. I just think he is everybody's talked about how great they think he can be and will be, and I think it's legit. So I love the spot. He goes to 4. I mean, a lot of times people don't love wide receivers going high because they just don't work out a lot of times, but I think he's a guy that's going to work out. I think it's what looked like a really terrible situation in Arizona just a year ago. Now all of a sudden doesn't look so bad.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure if I'm being selfish here or what, just because I'm a Trevor Lawrence guy, but Brian Thomas in Jacksonville, I think, was my favorite spot. You already saw they're pretty confident with the pick. They just, like you mentioned, they cut Zay Jones already, but Gabe Davis is a downfield field stretcher. Christian Kirk's a fantastic receiver. Just a great addition to this wide receiving core. And I think that Trevor Lawrence really needed some more offensive weapons here to make this, give him unlock all those tools. Anyway, I'll put it as far as that's concerned. We all knew the Caleb Williams one. We knew the Bears plan already. It was a go-to. I just traded for the 101 yesterday in the league. I got the 103 and the 203 for the 101. So I'm taking Caleb. I'm super confident that he will be the quarterback of the future. Probably the best quarterback in Bears history. It's not saying much because they only had Jay Cutler so far leading the show, but that's just having somebody like Brian Thomas to fall, go to Jacksonville anyway. That's my kind of like favorite pick anyway. That's may not turn out the best, but that's my favorite pick in round 1. So
I love that spot for him. That was my spot. I wanted him to go. I thought the fact that they moved back, got a couple extra picks, and still got him was a fantastic move. I just think he can be really good. Now, can he ever be wide receiver 1? We don't know. I think he's got every ability to do that if he can just work on his craft and his route running a little more, can add some more routes to his game. But man, he's got all the ability. I love it there where he doesn't have to come in and be the immediate man year 1 in Jacksonville, but he can help out and then work towards that. But I love the ceiling for him for sure. And I love that spot with Trevor Lawrence. They could have some nice years ahead, hopefully, if you got either of those guys in fantasy.
Yeah, absolutely. What about round 2? So round 1 was not so as fantasy friendly as we thought it was going to be, but round 2 ended up being a little bit better. Who was your favorite round 2 pick?
Ladd McConkey with the Chargers, because when you really look at Justin Herbert, he's had such a comfort level with the slot flanker type of receiver who can win outside, inside, but mainly on the inside. And you look at the receivers that they have, Quentin Johnston's a guy I cited as having some certain problems that were going to crop up early in his career if he doesn't take care of them. And he's a little bit unproven at this stage. And then you got, Josh Palmer, who's a solid contributor. We'll see if he can turn into a good starter. And they did draft some other guys that we may end up touching upon later. But McConkey really fits in what this offense did. And even though now you've got Greg Roman coming in, if you look at what Greg Roman's offenses often do, it's often about middle of the field receivers more often than anything as well. So McConkey functions really well in the screen game, RPO game, as well as in the middle of the field. And he can win on double moves outside. He's going to fit extremely well with what you want to see from a guy like Justin Herbert. So I don't think that they're going to veer. They're picking of Greg Roman to basically be the offensive guy on the offensive coordinator with that scheme that Harbaugh uses for the Chargers. It's not so much of a veer away from what Justin Herbert does best. So I think Ladd McConkey, we could see him, and he'll probably be one of the best fantasy fits as well. But he's a guy that I look at that could easily be the production leader at wide receiver among the rookies year 1.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I love that pick. That's for me too. I loved Ladd there. I loved when the Chargers called it. I like I said, if Marvin Harrison didn't get there, get to 5 to them, Ladd was the guy I loved. He is now for me in the top 10 in fantasy and Superflex, and in 1 QB, he's pushing, top 6 for me in 1 QB. I just love the landing spot. I'm with Matt on that one. I could absolutely see him end up being like the leading receiver in this rookie class, even though you're like, oh man, you got Dunze, you got Neighbors, you got Harrison. Those guys are studs, but man, what a great landing spot for fantasy. I mean, he right now, to me, he's their clear-cut number 1 option. And I don't think it's very close, really. So I absolutely love the landing spot. Other than that, Keon Coleman for fantasy, literally, I'm on a chat with people talking about how dead Keon Coleman is. And I kid you not, within 2 minutes, he gets drafted, as we're talking, right, leading into day 2, he gets drafted right away, first pick by the Bills. And everyone's like, never mind, I love Keon Coleman. It was like that instantly. Everyone's like, yeah. I don't hate Keon Coleman anymore. I mean, if he's going to the Bills and he's going to the Bills at the top of the 2nd round, I love him now. And so for fantasy, to me, it couldn't have got much better for Coleman's value going to the Bills, especially just after they moved Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, Justin, the Keon Coleman pick is a very good one. And I think that the reason why you saw that kind of whiplash effect with some of the people on boards is that Coleman's one of those players that, because he didn't run fast, people worry about him being an outside receiver getting separation. Or you look at like Matt Harmon, who does a really good job of studying film, but using an analytical approach to look at separation. Keon Coleman might be the exceptional case that kind of falls through the cracks of the methodology that Matt Harmon may use. It's something I'm going to hopefully get a chance to talk with him about later this week when I'm on his show. But really, Coleman's one of those guys that gets early separation with his route running and knows how to run good routes. And he also understands how to work open off structure. And he's probably the best contested catch receiver in this class. I would agree with Billy Bean on that one. I love Marvin Harrison and what he can do, but he has some flaws with where, when, and how he attacks certain targets that are going to crop up against the man on the island that he's going to be put on. Doesn't mean it's going to hurt his career like Quentin Johnston. We saw, you're just going to see some games where he could have been the elite producer that week, but he dropped that pass, or he could have won the game for them, but he dropped that pass because he didn't track it as well as he should have. Keon Coleman's the best at all those things. And so when you put him with a quarterback who throws with anticipation on first and second reads like Allen, but also is willing to fit a ball in tightly in unscripted situations and in tight coverage, Keon Coleman does all that well. So at worst, he's a better version of Gabriel Davis, what people thought Gabriel Davis would become, but wasn't going to become that. And that means at worst, he's the third read or second read guy, or the first read in schemed plays where you do a lot of misdirection to get him open, or he's the guy that on the unscripted play where the team's like, we're going to try and foil him on his first two reads and get him sacked, and he breaks past the pressure, and now Keon Coleman's behind the defense. It's kind of that deal. Like, think you guys are, I hear John. I know John's from up north, so I know that you listen to, like, you remember Hakeem Nicks.
Yes.
If you look at Hakeem Nicks, he's kind of a plus version of Hakeem Nicks, if you ask me, in some respects. He's not extremely fast in some ways that you measure it, but he's going to win on an island downfield. And I think that you're going to get a lot of value out of Keon Coleman with the Bills. So I love that pick too.
To circle back to your original, your pick first for Ladd McConkey. What I think everybody's I hear the echo chamber of Twitter already saying that Ladd McConkey's just going to he's a slot player now. That's it, because they got the prototypical guy that just envision him as a slot receiver. And he played a lot of outside, so where is McConkey? Is he going to be a slot player? Do you think he transition, because he played mostly outside in college? Like, what is his story for the NFL when he goes to the Chargers? What do they expect him? What do you expect to see him playing in the NFL?
I think he's going to play multiple roles, and I think you're going to see him probably a fair percentage of the time in the slot, but you're also going to see enough of a significant percentage at flanker. And the reason I say flanker is, even though he's got some speed, they'd probably rather have a big, fast, tall ball-winning type of receiver at split end. And when you watch McConkey on tape, he has great footwork off the line to beat press coverage, but he didn't have to really show hand counters and using his hands against defenders. So is it because he's so good with his feet, or is it because he hasn't faced an NFL caliber defender yet? And when you watch some of the tape, when he has faced defenders in very small volumes, iterations, he struggled against defenders who were able to get his hands on him early. Yeah. So I would say he's probably more of a flanker where he lines off a little bit off the line. You can use his footwork better. And also those guys are used more for plays where you're relied on to get yards after the catch. And he's not had to be a contested catch ball winner. Quentin Johnston, in theory, is what they'd like to see him do that. But in reality, he's horrible at that because he doesn't track the ball well. So they still need another guy for that. So I think McConkey's more of an inside guy and flanker combination.
Yeah, I think he needs more of that zone coverage to get open, because he's not, when they're playing man press and they got him on the line, he's not gonna be able to get open. Like, he's not good at that. He's not. I think he needs that buffer, of 5 or 7 or even 10-yard buffer from that zone coverage to get himself weasel through the field. But he looks. It looks like he's working on his skills anyway. I see him every other day. I see a new video of him, doing all these cuts and jukes and everything else. Like, he's preparing to put for the slot role in the NFL. I see that, but it's not an easy transition sometimes to people who are used to like playing on the outside a lot. So
for sure, because you have to be on the same page with your quarterback and understand the different coverage tells and zone disguises and man disguises or hybrid coverage disguises that trip people up. So I think with him, though, you're going to probably see with that offense that they will find ways to scheme him open, and he's going to get a steady diet of, because he's very good in the screen and RPO game. You're going to see a steady diet of those, and I think he's a smart enough player that you're going to see that where they put him, he'll still get a decent volume.
Yeah. I'm just kind of what I like the Ben Sinnott pick a little bit in the second round. I think everybody's saying, oh, it's too early, they could have got him later, la la la. I think a lot of people had the Zach Ertz as being year one, and then turn it over to Cole Turner in the future. And I think is Sinnott. Do you think Sinnott's an upgrade over all they have in a team right now? Do you think he's going to walk in and just start right away, or is he a learning like a work in progress?
That's a great question, and I love Ben Sinnott. I would say this pick kind of dropped him slightly for me, but not a lot, because talent-wise, he's great. And I think that I think the big thing, again, is just what we talked about with McConkey with coverages in the middle of the field. The most important thing is that learning the blocking scheme and how versatily are they going to try and use him. Like if they're going to try and use him as an H-back and he's got to understand a wide variety of assignments, that can be a little bit of a bandwidth occupier. So it can be working with a rookie quarterback and having to, or even a journeyman quarterback like Marcus Mariota, who makes a lot of errors, where you're going to have to try and be on the same page in a zone offense. And everyone's also trying to learn the system, the new system. So I think there's going to be a little delay from that standpoint. I think Trey McBride, I think, is probably a good example of that, regardless of the fact that they shared a common coach, at least for 1 year. Because that's really not why I mentioned it. I just think it's more just the really the acclimation process. But the thing that concerns me, why he's not like my slam dunk number 2 tight end on the board, is that when you look at Cliff Kingsbury's offenses in college and NFL, college they didn't really use a tight end much. They like to use a lot of 4 receivers, and in the NFL, the best year for a tight end was, I think, 588 yards from Zach Ertz. And the rest of the years, it was between 200 and 300 yards for the best tight end. Now, is that because they didn't have a good tight end, or is it because of the scheme? And I'm a little more worried that it might be the scheme, but not enough that I wouldn't shy away from taking Sinnott. It's just that I probably won't take him as my number 2 guy on the board. If I can get him as my 3rd or 4th guy, I'd feel a little bit better there, just because there is that inherent risk that the executives on the Commanders shopped for one type of grocery and the coach wanted something different. And that happens a lot, and it happens a lot with tight ends.
Yeah, you got McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and then Austin Eckler's going to get a lot of midfield dump off passes too. So I'm just kind of worried where Ben Sinnott fits in this offense. It kind of scares me a little bit. I know that possibly in the future he'll be the not focal point of the offense, but he'll have a bigger role. But right now he just seems to be kind of lost.
I would agree. I mean, he might be waiting for Cliff Kingsbury to go to another town where he can collect his millions. Like, he might be I don't know. I don't want to make that joke, but he's certainly a guy that, he's certainly a guy that seems to fail upward. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
I love the draft capital for Sinnott. He was right on my tight end 2-3 coming into the draft. I had him in Sanders, Jadavius Sanders right there. So I liked it. Him going 2nd round to me is great for his fantasy value. Now, I'm not drafting him expecting him to do anything year one. I'm not going to get him in there and take him as my tight end 1 and play him every week. I still, even though he got taken in the 2nd round, he's still not in the 2nd round for me in fantasy drafts. I'm still waiting on him. I'm probably outside of Bowers. I'm probably not taking anyone until the late 3rd, early 4th round as far as tight end is concerned for me in fantasy drafts.
Yeah, that's I agree with that 100%. So third round picks here. We got Trey Benson, that's 302. Blake Corum, Roman Wilson, Marshawn Lloyd, Malachi Corley, Jermaine Burton, which a lot of people have talked about Jermaine Burton a lot in this preseason as kind of a sleeper. And then he went a little bit higher than a lot of people thought. So Luke McCaffrey, Jalen McMillan. So JT, who was your favorite third round pick?
My favorite guy was Trey Benson. I love the landing spot for him. He was my RB1 all year coming in. I know he was the second running back off the board after Jonathan Brooks went to the Panthers in the second round. So I was really, wanted to know where he was going to go. I thought there was a chance the Cowboys might try to take him after Brooks went to the Panthers before their pick. Once he got past them, I was like, okay, where's a decent landing spot? And I was really eyeing the top of that third round. I thought, okay, Cardinals would be a really good landing spot for him. And I thought the Chargers would be a good landing spot. And the Cardinals had 2 picks there right at the top. So I thought, there's a good shot they go there. When he went there, I loved it because I think he's a guy, I don't think he's a similar type of player as James Conner, but I think he fits the system the same. And again, Conner, guy's a stud, but he's had injuries concerns. He's up in that 28, 29-year-old range. This probably is his last year in all honesty in Arizona. So I love the spot. I don't know how much run he gets this first year, but he's got great hands. He can catch out of the backfield. I just like where he fits with Kyler, where he fits with Marvin Harrison Jr., with McBride. I just like the way they're building this Cardinals offense, and that has me excited for him. And I got to stick with him. He's my guy. He's been my guy for a year and a half, so he was my RB1 all along, and I love this landing spot for him. And I just think, for me personally, I know a lot of people are going to take Jonathan Brooks first, and I can absolutely 100% understand why they would do that. I want Benson because I think he's going to be on a much better offense. I just think Arizona's offense is going to be a whole lot better than Carolina's offense. And so for me, I'm leaning Benson. And Benson had the same ACL tear as Brooks, but it was 2 years ago at this point, where Brooks is just coming off of it. So that's at least the guy I got most excited about in round 3. And just because I love that, he was a mid-second round, late second round pick for most people coming into the drafts, going into the third round, a nice landing spot, pushes them up to early second, late first in most fantasy leagues.
Yeah, this was like a running back happy third round. It's kind of that's
we kind of expected that. We kind of said, hey, if a bunch of these guys go in the third, early fourth, and get a decent landing spot, it would be solid for fantasy.
Sure. Yeah. Matt, who was your favorite third round pick?
Benson was a nice pick, that's for sure. There are a few running backs here that are really compelling. Blake Corum, I think, was one of the safest running backs in this class and has a good shot to eventually take over in LA. And I think that, we'll see how that works out. But for me, it was Jermaine Burton. I was very high on Jermaine Burton. I think that he's a Robert Woods type of player who can play all 3 positions if you need him to. And he's a little bit better of a deep threat than what Robert Woods would have provided in his prime. He is a really competitive player overall, who plays hard, gets good yards after the catch, can make contested plays if you need to, but a strong route runner, especially in the middle of the field. So when you take him and put him in a Bengals system where that Tyler Boyd's gone, he has the ability to probably do some work in the slot early if you need him to, in selected looks. But also T. Higgins wants to be traded. He's on the market. Now, listen, NFL players have a limited timeline in terms of how much money they get to make. And so I can understand that they're concerned about trying to get the most money that they can. And the Bengals are a notoriously cheap organization. So I get that on one level. On the other level, I want to win championships. And if I'm saving my money, and very few people at that age have the wisdom to know how to manage their money. But if he had the ability to do that, or does, it would be wiser for him to stay in Cincinnati, where he probably has the best chance to win a Super Bowl. And if he's gone, Jermaine Burton, you put him in there, he may not do the boundary catching contested work at the level that Higgins does, but everything else he does is better than Higgins, if you ask me. As timing routes, yards after the catch, working over the middle, the fact that he can play all three positions. If Jamar Chase got hurt, T. Higgins couldn't do what Jamar Chase does. Can't remotely come close. Jermaine Burton can be at least within striking distance enough that he's competent, and in terms of production that he could deliver for the Bengals as Jamar's replacement if needed for stretches. He could carry that receiving core. T. Higgins can't carry that receiving core in terms of the role that he would have to play. So for me, Jermaine Burton is not only a nice pick for the Bengals because they get a third receiver who can force opposing defenses to pick their poison, but he also provides redundancy that Higgins doesn't provide and can step in and be the Devonta Smith to A.J. Brown type of thing, or a Jordan Addison to Justin Jefferson, because Jamar Chase is arguably the best wide receiver in the league. I mean, you can probably say that for about 5 receivers, but he's one of those 5 guys easily. And Burton is a type of player that will complement him very well.
Is the rumors about him being like kind of not uncoachable, but like not compatible with some coaching, or
he's had some off the field issues, some things that teams looked at. Do you think he was a late first, early second if it wasn't for those concerns? Because it feels like a lot of teams kind of moved him down or out, but like anybody that said they watched the film was like, this guy's better than a lot of the guys that we're talking about in this draft if you just went strictly on talent and tape.
Yeah, pretty much. And here's the thing about the NFL. That may be true. Some of the things that are talked about, it may not be. Arian Foster was seen as being soft. Okay. That was the thing. Terrell Davis, I remember being monitoring practice year after year when I was at Georgia as a student and covering Georgia Bulldog football practices on a daily basis when I was there, when Terrell Davis and Garrison Hurst were there. And, Ray Goff, the coach, hated Terrell Davis at that time. Thought he was soft, thought he didn't work hard because he was hurt, and thought it was like phony injuries, and blocked people from watching his tape. Meanwhile, he loved Garrison Hurst because Garrison Hurst was getting him recruits and was a Heisman Trophy candidate. But Garrison Hurst had behavioral maturity issues and that was something that people realized later on. But I remember trying to interview him, and players who I would ask about him say, "Hey, has he come out of the locker room yet?" And the players would just roll their eyes at me and shake their head and go, "You're not going to get a chance to talk to him." And like they would say it in a way where it was, what they're basically inferring is this dude doesn't care, and we're kind of tired of his attitude. And there's a little bit of that type of thing going on there. So when you look at players off the field, oftentimes these NFL teams do a really poor job of who to send out to evaluate it. Because think about it this way, we're all in our 40s and 50s, late 30s, early 40s, somewhere in that range. We're in that range. If a lot of these scouts are in their early to mid 20s or late 20s, a lot of them who are in your age range have never had a job managing people, recruiting people, interviewing people. They're just there watching film, and they're told to go out and do this. And then they're told to give their opinion about it. And they have no life experience. Talking with people I know who've actually worked directly for GMs after being after being players, scouts, and now they work on a more of a consultancy basis, working directly with the executives. They're like, listen, the good teams, they have people with law enforcement interviewing backgrounds, with psychology backgrounds, industrial psychology backgrounds, people who understand how to ask the questions, what questions to ask, who to ask with those questions, and how to form a good opinion of that. And they're directed to do that, not the scouts. If they and so sometimes what happens, as an example, I've given in the past, but I think it's compelling with this is that they'll ask about a player and go, the Chicago Bears took Jimmy Smith off their board, the cornerback, because he smoked pot, and they said he was a bad kid because he smoked pot, not because he just smoked, and Jimmy Smith is a very good kid and a very good young man who was a good player for a while. I've seen situations where, teams have taken players off draft boards and it was because they found out that he was a partier. But what they did is they asked the recruiting coordinator and said, yeah, he goes out every night. Where does he go? They go to a bar here in town. They go to, so the scout goes to the bar in town. Do you see this kid? Do you see this kid here regularly? Cocktail waitress is like, yeah, he's here every night. Thanks a lot. They go off and they say he's a partier. He's not, we need to worry about him. Another scout comes in who actually has a clue, maybe has the background, got some training, and asks the same question. She said, yeah. He goes, when does he get here? About 7:30. When does he leave? About 9, no later than 9. Does he come every day? Yeah. Does he drink? No. He'll buy drinks for other people. He brings water. Does he come with the same people? Yeah. Ever get in trouble? No. He just talks to his friends. Girls come up to him. He buys them a drink, and then he leaves by 9 and he's gone. Do you know other bars he goes to? Yeah. And they'll ask and they go, does he come here? He goes, yeah, he comes here at like 8:30 after he comes to the, I'm like, the story ties together. You see it, and like the kid is basically a teetotaler who just likes to socialize and knows he's got to go to the bar to do it, and then he gets home and he gets back to his dorm room in time. And that's the difference that people don't realize. And the NFL makes these mistakes just as much as corporate America does, where, they eschew the kid who maybe was had a drunk driving offense at 17 and got it expunged from his record. But people knew about it, but they say, no, forget that kid. Meanwhile, their VP of HR has had 6 DWIs in the past 10 years, and he's still working there, and a problem.
Yeah, you get Dan Marino, the same thing. When he was smoking dope, he fell down on the draft. You get Frank Gore, who was injury prone in college, never got injured in the NFL. There's all kind of, the stereotypes you get labeled with people when they, come in the NFL. But it's about the talent on the field that, people should be most concerned about. Unless there's, crazy red flags about somebody. But, that's, for the most part, I think these are, you hit the nail on the head. So what about JT? You said you're 30. So I don't know. Let's just go here for the 4th, 5th, and 6th round. The 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and the rest of the UDFA, which we just saw Frank Gore Jr. get picked up by the Bills. Speaking of Frank Gore, the rest of the draft, who do you think? Who was your favorite landing spot of guys that went outside the first 3 rounds?
John, I'll jump in here real quick on this one, just because we just talked about Frank Gore and the Bills. My favorite landing spot was Ray Davis out of Kentucky, the running back going to the Bills in the 4th round. I love Ray Davis. I know I've talked about him a ton. We actually just had a comment here. Newell Mailman Chris says, woo, I took Ray Davis with the 3-1 pick in my Superflex draft. I love it. I've been telling people he's probably more of a mid-3rd round guy, but you don't want to miss out on him. If you got to get him at the beginning of the 3rd, get him at the beginning of the 3rd. I've been taking him at 3-1, 3-2, 3-4, 3-5, the last 3 days in every draft I'm in. So I love it. And the reason I love it is, yes, they got James Cook there. Yes, he's going to be the starter, but Ray Davis does all kinds of things well. I think they'll figure out how to utilize him in Buffalo. And I think the fact that he is a bigger, stronger, more powerful guy around the goal line, he's going to take some of that stuff where they were giving Latavius Murray carries and some other guys carries. I think he goes in there and gets a decent role there. And I think they play. And if anything happens to Cook, I think he immediately can be the number 1 guy there and do well. He's a grown man. The guy's, played 3 different colleges, successful everywhere. He's 24 going on 25. He's a grown up. He's ready to play right now. So that for me was a great spot because I was worried that he'd get somewhere where he would be kind of really buried with other guys or be the same type of running back as the guy they already had. And so he would get less looks. So I loved it. I love Ray Davis in the 3rd round of Superflex rookie drafts. I had him as my number 5 running back coming in. I told people he, to me, was the cheaper Blake Corum. Like, I think he is a type of player similar to Blake Corum. I think he shows a better receiving profile than Blake Corum does. He's, slightly older, but they're very, very similar, the same size of players, same speed. So I'm like, hey, if you like Blake Corum, you should be getting Ray Davis as well, because he's a very, very similar type player and going for cheaper, and especially in fantasy right now. Now, will he continue to stay cheap? I don't know, because I keep pushing up his draft stock at every show that I'm on. But that's my guy. I had to just talk about Ray there, because I thought with the Bills, I really liked where going there.
How about you, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I like Ray Davis. I think that's a good one. I think the only thing that he'll have to work on is maybe pass protection. That's where he's very weak, and so it may take a little bit of time for him to be really a full-time guy if Cook gets hurt. But I think that he'll get the primary role as a runner, very good runner, and I think that Justin made great points there. I would say Kamani Vidal in the 6th round is probably my favorite pick of the late round picks. He is when people thought that DeAndre Swift was a good runner, like a good all-around runner, and they mistook that for his production, they were really looking at Kamani Vidal in the future. Vidal is built a lot like Swift, but a little quicker and faster, better between the tackles. He's a better decision maker when it comes to running inside the tackles. He doesn't try and bounce things out all the time. He doesn't need wide open spaces simulated by zone plays or toss plays to be able to work, or simulated by draw plays, excuse me. But like, he's a rugged player. He's a good pass protector who's going to get even better in that regard. And I think that you look at the Chargers right now, they just took J.K. Dobbins off as a free agent before the draft. And so they're taking a speculative chance with someone who knows the system, and if it works, he's going to be one of the best backs in the league. But we know that with an Achilles tear and an ACL tear, it's unlikely that that's going to be the case. They're just hoping. But the guy that I think that can fulfill that role best, Vidal, has a really good shot at that. So I think within a year or two, he could be kind of the Isaiah Pacheco of this particular draft class.
Yeah, I think this might be a little bit because I'm my Dolphins bias here, but Jalen Wright in Miami just fits the team's kind of persona, or they're the way they look at things, the way the speed, that the breakaway speed. I like Devin A-Chain, but I think he has limitations. So Jalen Wright comes in here. I'm not sure if he's going to get the bulk of the carries right from the get-go. Probably not, but I just feel like he landed somewhere that just fit a team's vision, a team's view. I feel like they're going to use him in a way that he should be used. So all the positives that Jalen Wright has is something that makes me happy that he fell with my favorite team anyway, the Dolphins. So
that's a great selection, John. I mean, that's a great choice because I comped Jalen Wright to Raheem Mostert. Mostert just got a small extension. He's the main guy. They want a guy like that. HN they know is just going to be a compliment, and they don't want him carrying the load. But Wright has the best chance of doing what Raheem Mostert does well and be the guy that takes over for that. Yeah,
the Dolphins definitely have a type. If you had redheads or brunettes or the Jeff Wilsons and the Devon A-Chains, the Mosterts, the athletic guys, these speedsters. I think Wright just fits right in there, and I think he'll take over this role a lot sooner than people think. So that's I love that pick for the Dolphins. So let's talk about best landing spots for fantasy. Who is the best landing spot for quarterbacks are concerned? JT, I'll start with you. Which quarterback just fucking fell right where he's supposed to fall?
I mean, Caleb Williams, to me, being the 1-1, usually that's a terrible situation for everyone because your team is terrible. I mean, we saw what happened to Bryce Young last year. I think it's a great spot. Just the fact that the Bears went out there and got him help on offense. The O-line is much improved. Adding Keenan Allen is big time. Added Rome Odunze. I mean, he's going to have every opportunity to hit. So I really like the spot for him. It's hard not to. Outside of him, if I had to pick another QB, JJ McCarthy. I don't know. I mean, I loved when I saw him at the scouting combine. I love the way he threw the ball. You could see the zip on it. I think he's a guy who can be successful. Can he be right away, or does he need time? That's a question mark. But he has, I think, the best pieces around him with Justin Jefferson, Addison, who I love, and then when Hott comes back at tight end from the injury. He's got the best pieces around him. Now, the question is, will they still be there, and will he be starting anytime soon? I don't know. But Caleb Williams to me is a pretty clear cut, just with all the things that the Bears have done, and the defense is finally good again. They showed the second half of last year that they were much better than they had been previously.
Yeah, you got a defensive-minded head coach, an offense is on the up and up. The Bears are talk about a 2-year turnaround that nobody really kind of saw. This is what was going on with the Bears' future, what the hell was happening, and they are in a good place right now. And the other thing was that the NFC North, the division itself, everybody was kind of like, man, the Bears are falling behind. Everybody in here is in this race to the top, and the Bears are just sitting in the idle in the back. They've made so many good moves in the last couple of years to put themselves in a situation which they're probably going to win the NFC North this year. I mean, that doesn't seem like even a hot take. I think they're just across the board, just a talented team. So, Matt, quarterback-wise, as quarterbacks are concerned, I know we already heard about the situations of some of the quarterbacks, but for fantasy-wise, who's going to score the most fantasy points? If you're on the board right now, you say you got Caleb Williams is gone or whatever the deal may be. Fantasy-wise, who's the best quarterback you think in this draft for yourself?
Well, I mean, I would have nothing to add about Caleb, and I think that's obviously the best one. I think that if we're going to look 3 to 4 years down the line, it's easily going to be Michael Penix. And I explained why earlier in the show. Yeah. I think JJ McCarthy is a nice option too, for the reasons that you mentioned, but I don't have anything to add from that standpoint.
Yeah, I think Sam Darnold's going to keep that job, so I'm not sure what's going to happen with JJ McCarthy. So that's my fantasy, my Sam Darnold on every one of my teams as a desperation dart throw option right now. So I'm rooting for Darnold everywhere. I got him for $4.11 yesterday, and I said, man, if Darnold really gets a chance with this team, I'm not sure they can, I saw JJ McCarthy play. I saw in the state championship game here, Mount Carmel just destroyed him. I mean, they beat him like 36-10 or something like that. I've seen what he does. I've seen him in college. Makes things happen. I get him, I get it, but I'm a Sam Darnold truther, I guess. I always will be at heart. So I'm not as big at JJ McCarthy as everybody else is, I guess. So, but as far as running backs are concerned, which running back is the number one for fantasy? You think, or I'm not going to say like for points wise, but in the long term, 2 or 3 year dynasty window, which running back just fell in the perfect spot? Matt, we'll start with you.
I mean, I think that when you look at this, there are 3 candidates: Jonathan Brooks, Blake Corum, and then probably Trey Benson at this stage. And with an outside chance of being with Kamani Vidal. But I'll just go with talent, and I'll say Jonathan Brooks, mainly because they've improved the interior line. I think people have written off Bryce Young a little bit too early. It was a bad situation that I think has possible to get better, while David Tepper scares the bejesus out of everyone in terms of the behavior that he exhibits as an owner and some of the kind of meddling, interfering micromanagement where he's out of his depth. I think overall, you're looking at a very talented back who's going to have a better offensive line, who can create. He's the best pass protecting running back in his class. And with Chuba Hubbard going to be gone next year, Miles Sanders is going to be a non-factor really after that. Brooks can be the guy. And I think that this team is in a division that really is kind of in flux after Atlanta, where they can still compete well, and Brooks can get enough touches both in the receiving game and the rushing game.
Yes. JT?
Yeah, I'll go with what I said before. I think Benson. Benson's the guy for me. I just think I like the long-term outlook of the offense for the Cardinals. I think he fits that system really well. I think Brooks got a great landing spot as far as being on the Panthers and going to have a pretty clear cut once he's healthy, like Matt said, to kind of take the number one job there. So then those are my top 2 guys. I'm not a huge Kyron Williams guy. So I think Blake Corum's got a really nice shot there for the Rams. If you're hoping he was going to go somewhere to get a chance to win the job, I think that's an actual decent spot for him there.
Blake Corum is a better football player than the number of stats guy. His 40-yard dash wasn't great. Some of the numbers weren't as good as we thought, but he's just a good football player. That's the difference between some of these guys that show up on stat sheets or in their spreadsheets. But Blake Corum just is a guy who knows the game of football, who loves the game of football, who plays it like it should be played. So yeah, absolutely. I like Blake Corum a ton. I think not that he comes over and just takes over the role, but I think he is someone who could, by the end of the year, by halfway through the season, they just kind of saying this guy's not a one-trick pony, he can do everything kind of deal. So I big fan of Blake Corum. What about wide receiver, Matt?
I think Rome Odunze actually has the best long-term fantasy opportunity here, at least from what we know right now, because you can look at Marvin Harrison and he's got to be the man right away, and he might get some opportunity for the most points right away. But as I mentioned, he has some issues with tight man coverage where he has a tell off the line where he's going to get jammed by top corners. He's going to have some issues tracking the ball in certain areas, not along the boundary where he makes great over the shoulder catches, but where he has to present himself towards the ball. He doesn't use the right hands positions. I don't think it's going to hurt him majorly, but I think it's going to be significant enough that you may see long term that he's maybe less of a slam dunk Randy Moss trade the entire house to get the guy, and more of a plus version Mike Williams aspiring Larry Fitzgerald, but not quite get there type of player. Whereas Malik Neighbors is the most talented of the big three, but we don't know what their quarterback situation's looking like right now. And he may get the same volume as Harrison. I like his receiving skills better. But when you look at Odunze, look, he gets to work with two excellent veterans, one who's in his prime in DJ Moore, who's learned to become an all-around receiver, and one in Keenan Allen, who is on the backside of his prime, but still good enough athletically when he stays healthy to be a top contributor and play everywhere. Michael Penix can play all three roles. He compares a lot to Devontae Adams, and that was something I found out later. I think we've all found out later that he's modeled his game after Adams. And I work with a guy who works with Caleb Williams, and while everyone talks about Williams as being the next Patrick Mahomes, his game that he worked on is to be more Aaron Rodgers like. So you're getting a very similar situation with putting Odunze, a Devontae Adams type of player with an Aaron Rodgers aspiring type of player in an offense that already has two good players who are going to take pressure off of him. So he's going to get efficient looks and continue to grow and build. He's going to get the best development track with the best young quarterback. And I think that that's going to translate to him becoming a perennial number one receiver.
Yeah, that's I agree with all that. Just to be in practice with two guys who are route runners extraordinaires has got to be. I mean, he's going to be there. Odunze is going to be there and just learn so much from these two, especially the Keenan Allen. Like you watch Keenan Allen, he runs a 4.7 or almost a 4.8 40-yard dash, but man, the guy is just a tactician at running routes. He's going to learn so much from those two guys. I can't wait to see his. I'm not as a long-term asset. Yeah, he's which I wasn't a big fan of Odunze before this, but I liked him, but not as much as the other two. But just landing in a situation where he landed, I'm super happy about that. So JT.
I'll talk about a guy. There's quite a few guys I like out here. I gotta agree with the Matt on the Odunze pick. That I think long term he's got to be the guy for all the reasons he just said. I think he's just got the most upside, tied to one of the best young quarterbacks. A guy I'm really interested in, and the reason I bring him up is because I was kind of out on him, and now I'm trying to decide if I back in on him, and that's A.D. Mitchell from Texas going to the Colts in the second round. A lot of people are like, oh, he's got first round talent. He's got all those, crazy athletic skills, abilities, everything you want when you're going to the combine. You're like, that's the guy we want. The size, the speed, the vertical, the broad jump. He's got all those things. And then he's got a good catch rate. So I just wasn't sold on him, like whether I thought he was going to be just one of those guys that like you looked at the end of the day and you're like, is he going to be not the same ending, but is he going to be a Martavius Bryant where you see the fantastic plays, and you're like, oh man, this guy is just so unbelievable. But then all of a sudden he disappears. Other times is he going to have off the field issues. I just wasn't sold on him. But if he can be that deep guy that we thought Alec Pierce was going to be for the Colts, and now they actually have a guy who can throw the ball deep, and Anthony Richardson, man, he just intrigues me of what he could be with Anthony Richardson in the deep ball he throws. So he's a guy that I'm not 100% sure where I stand on him. But he's very intriguing to me of what he can end up being on that Colts team if he's long-term on the Colts. If Pittman gets moved in a year or two, does Mitchell eventually become that alpha one for the Colts, or is he always kind of ends up being a 2-3 for a team? So that's a guy. I'm not sure how Matt feels about him, but that's a guy that I want to look into a little bit more now.
Well, I mean, I think that AD Mitchell was a player that is on the cusp of having the ability to be an immediate starter in the right system. And this is a good system for him to be able to do that, because they're going to ask him to do what he does best right now, which is run deep routes, win some contested plays, and work kind of like short stop type of routes or some zone routes where his route running doesn't have to be the sharpest thing over the middle for him to get the work done that he needs to do. So he pairs well in the way that you mentioned with Alec Pierce, in terms of being a faster, maybe more proven ball winning alternative to what Pierce hasn't been able to do with the Colts. So I think that that's good, and he has room to grow into a little bit more of a complete player. We'll see if he makes that transition. But as he is right now, it makes him a little bit more of an up and down fantasy option, especially when you have Josh Downs, who can be a vertical threat inside, as well as a good after the catch and zone threat and over the middle field guy. And then you have, what Pittman offers. So I see Mitchell's maybe being the third or fourth option in a lot of looks, and maybe only being the first or second option in some limited looks early on. But it means that he can be one of those. He'd be a very good best ball player, if you ask me. That's where I think he projects immediately. And then down the line, if he continues to improve his route running, he's on a team where the sky could be the limit.
Speaking of best ball, do you think Xavier Worthy is going to be just a best ball guy? He's probably going to take over the MVS role. Just be it do a Tyreek. Their Tyreek replacement, I guess, is where he's being compared now, or comped, or what they plan on using him for. But is it a landing spot dependent why his value went up so much, or is it is he really going to be a constant contributor to the Chiefs right from the get-go?
It's that people caught up with it's that people didn't really value Xavier Worthy the way that they should have. And now that he got a landing spot to make the excuse, they can now do that. I mean, that's my point of view, because Xavier Worthy was my fourth best receiver in this class. And he projected to me as a Deshaun Jackson, Isaac Bruce type of talent who can work over the middle, make contested plays, and he's physical after the catch for his size. He understands how to use physicality well for his size in a manner that's not going to get him hurt. People saw a little bit of fighting the ball maybe, or they just compared him. They look at his landing spot with the Chiefs and they go, well, it didn't work for Mecole Hardman. It didn't work for Sky Moore. It didn't work with Kadarius Toney. They look at these things and they're just logo scouting as opposed to scouting the player. I didn't like Mecole Hardman like that. I didn't like MVS like that. I didn't like Sky Moore like that. But Xavier Worthy, it fits. And when you say Deshaun Jackson, we're talking like what Deshaun Jackson did at the height of his career. And Andy Reid knew that because he drafted him. I think this is a kid who can come in and be, he'll probably have an AD Mitchell role early, but I think he has a greater chance of fulfilling what AD Mitchell has promised to fulfill in this offense. And I would expect Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney to be gone rather soon, MVS to be gone rather soon. And it's going to be the Marquise Brown, Xavier Worthy show there with a touch of Travis Kelce as his career continues, or healthy does to Travis Kelce. But no, I think Xavier Worthy's legit, and I think it's a little bit mixed because people are scared off about him just being a one-note player when he's a lot more than that, and his film shows it. And that he went to Kansas City where, all these expectations that they had fell hard, and now they don't want to do it, and they don't understand the why, but they have, but they kind of BS their way around it and say that he's a risk.
So I'll kick off the tight ends real fast here. Theo Johnson. What do you think about Theo Johnson? I think he was my favorite tight end. Obviously he's my second favorite tight end in this draft. But if Darren Waller retires, I mean, there's no world where he doesn't beat out Daniel Bellinger, right? I mean, he's going to be the number one tight end in this team, and they only have, Wan'Dale's a decent receiver, and Jalen Hyatt is still to be determined, I guess, if he's going to pan out. He showed some flashes his rookie year. I still like him, but having Malik Neighbors on the team as the number one probably receiver now. Where do you think Theo Johnson fits in his New York Giants offense?
I think the thing with Theo Johnson is physically he certainly projects to be one of the top tight ends in this class, especially with the way that he worked out. The big issue with him is if he's going to translate that to being a Darren Waller-esque type of player in the receiving game is going to be against man-to-man coverage where he struggles a bit, mainly when he's facing tighter man coverage because his footwork looks like he's working in cement when he's in those situations, which didn't happen as often in the college game, but will happen a lot more often in the NFL. When he's facing zone or off coverage, that athletic ability comes to the fore and he looks great. The blocking, I think, is good enough that it can get better. That's where Bellinger early on will have the advantage. Bellinger is just an underneath option. Right. So they really need Theo Johnson to step up in that area. But in order for him to do that, to really take pressure off of the rest of the team, he's going to have to be pretty good in man-to-man coverage, especially tight at the line. And that's where if he gets better, the upside gets unlocked. If he doesn't, he's more of a zone option off of play action. And you're still going to be able to scheme him open, but it makes the offense a little more predictable and maybe makes him a little bit more of an up-and-down player production-wise. But he's certainly worth an investment to see it and find out if he can do it.
Who's your favorite tight end besides Brock Bowers after Brock Bowers?
Really, I would say Cade Stover at this point. I like Ben Sano. In terms of ability, it's Ben Sano. In terms of combination of ability and landing spot, it's Cade Stover because he gets reunited with C.J. Stroud. All those receivers and tight ends, except for Tank Dell, are going to be see their contracts end at the end of 2025. And while Dallas Schultz is a competent tight end, he does get banged up. He's more of an underneath receiver and a good blocker, whereas Cade Stover can stretch the field up the vertical seam a little bit better. He's a very good pass catcher and better runner after the catch. And I could see situations, especially with defenses, that the way the defenses are playing offenses right now in the NFL, where they're going to go to more two tight end sets and get Stover used in a manner where he can be that vertical seam stretcher. So I think long-term, he probably has one of the better fits.
JT?
I love the Stover call. I was worried about him. I liked him in college, but I was worried about him landing spot where he would fit. And then, going to Texans, I thought was perfect. Goes with Stroud. He was a great receiver for Stroud the year before. So I love that one. I'm very interested in Eric All, what he going to Cincinnati. Obviously, a guy with a ton of talent. He's been hurt most of his career in college, but he's got the ability, and there's a chance for an opening there. I mean, we'll see. Mike Gesicki's there. Can he revive his career for the Bengals? So he's an interesting guy for me. I was going to tell you, John, did you want to jump in? We got a couple draft questions here for some guys. You want to jump on some of these?
Yeah, Mr. Waldman, what do you have higher in Dynasty? PPR Shipley or Will Shipley or Bucky Irving?
Will Shipley. Bucky Irving, to me, people look at him as a receiving back, but he struggles to catch the ball in certain situations that I think are going to translate poorly to the NFL, and he's going to need a little bit more work. Shipley is a smarter receiver, better route runner, and I think a quicker, faster player between the tackles. Irvin has that nice quickness and he's got some flashy movement for sure, but I think Shipley's just a better all-around player. And I think Shipley will begin to cement a role as Bucky Irvin's career starts to flame out, which I would say will happen in about 2 to 3 years.
There are a lot of Will Shipley haters out there, man. There's a lot of guys who do not like Will Shipley. I'm not sure why, but that's
I don't know. I think I'll answer it real quick if you want. And just the quick answer is this: is that when you look at Clemson's scheme, when they had a quarterback, it made their running backs look better because there's a lot of schemed up looking plays, made Travis Etienne and Spiller look better than they really were. And Etienne's good, but he had work to do. It was kind of the reverse. It hid Shipley. Shipley's a good back, smart back, but when you didn't have the quarterback to really drive the offense in the way they schemed things up, it gave the running back more challenges than he needed to have. And so he looked good in process, but in terms of stats, he didn't have as strong as stats as those other guys. So they're hating on him.
Yeah, the same mailman, Chris Joel Smith, one of our home league homies here. Have you all talked about Roman Wilson yet? I drafted him at 304. The Steelers are known to have day two. Their day two drafting wide receivers is just like one of their fortes. He says, will the Steelers continue to success at drafting a wide receiver or drafting and training up rookie wide receivers? We all know about the day two Steelers wide receiver pick is a fan favorite, and it usually pans out for them. What do you think about that, Matt?
I was just talking with a former scout and another current one the other day, and I was asking them, they didn't know for sure, but I asked them if the Steelers have had a change within their organization the past couple of years, especially when it came to their scouting room, because I would say Roman Wilson might be that marker, as well as if you even look at Pickens and some of those other guys, because Pickens has some really good skills, but he's a little up and down. If there's going to be a change into the guard in terms of that perception of the Steelers, because Roman Wilson has a lot of work to do when it comes to running routes and getting off the line of scrimmage. And he's more of a flashy athlete than he is a good technician. And a lot of the players that they actually were good at drafting over the years were better technicians, and then just happened to either have some flash as athletes. You think of like Emmanuel Sanders as like the quintessential guy that put them on the board as one of those players. He was a very good technician. You just happen to have some speed. I'm a little bit. I look at this one and I would say I don't think Roman Wilson's going to follow in those footsteps.
Nice. Real fast, another draft question. I have the 110 and always draft best player available. 12-team Superflex. Would you go Bo Nix, Brooks, Worthy, BTJ, Ladd, or Coleman? Brian Thomas, Ladd, or Coleman?
I would say I'd probably go with Ladd right there. And then if Ladd is gone, I would probably go with either Worthy or Brooks at that point. And BTJ's in the mix too. But I'd say if you always draft best player available, probably err on the side of the wide receivers, because then you can dictate what running back you want when you have a surplus with that, and they last longer.
I just traded a 109 for Devonta Smith. I got Devonta Smith, traded away to 109, and I got flamed for it in my league, saying I blew my pick, but whatever. I'm a Devonta Smith guy. I think he's a proven receiver. I like him, so whatever. You can say whatever you want, but I'll take Devonta Smith at the 109 anytime.
I'm a Ladd guy there at 110. I love Ladd. So I'm Ladd first. I'm Brian Thomas second for me. And then it would be a toss-up between Worthy and Coleman. I'd probably take Worthy first and then Coleman. But I go Ladd, Thomas, Worthy for me.
You got another 10 minutes, Matt?
I got 5.
You got 5. Okay. Do you want to? Okay, real fast. Who's your worst landing spot?
Drake May. Drake May. People love him. I don't really understand that he drifts in the pocket. He has some issues in the black zone and in the red zone in terms of how to really manage the field well. His accuracy is spotty inside when you actually chart it and not just box score. chart it, you actually look at the film and you watch placement based on the coverage, he has some issues there. There's a lot to learn. And this whole Elliott Wolf is going to bring the Packers plan to New England. Well, the Packers plan that Elliott Wolf observed was having a quarterback sit 3 years and then add some young receivers to the mix. And he's ready now to work with those 3 receivers because he's had some intermittent playing time. Drake May's getting dropped in with guys who were either hurt, like in Kendrick Moore, still developing in Pop Douglas, or rookies. And so you're putting them all at the same time. I think that you're throwing this guy into the fire. And this is the guy that most needed the Michael Penix time that Michael Penix is getting. Michael Penix, after Caleb Williams, needed the least amount of time compared to those and is going to get the most. So for me, Drake May's the guy that I'm most worried to wind up getting into. I know you like Sam, and I think that Sam was a good prospect, but you're putting him in a Sam Darnold situation in New England where he's going to start seeing ghosts and their coaching staff is just going to stare off in the distance. Maybe they're not going to be coke fueled like Adam Gase was while he was staring off into the distance on Monday night when his quarterback's telling him that he probably shouldn't be on the field, even though that's not what he was saying specifically. That was what he was saying if you're a manager, and he didn't do anything about it. So I look at this and I'm rooting for Drake May, but I feel like this is a bad situation.
Yeah, my worst was Braylon Allen. I think I like Braylon Allen a little more than most people do. I like big running backs, young running back. I think it was more of him trying to absorb the playbook and thinking too much than actually just being a good football player in college. I think he's just somebody that I thought was going to land somewhere and have a good chance at a better spot. But being behind Breece Hall, I like Israel Abanikanda too. I can't believe that he landed on the same team with my other crush. And then Isaiah Davis gets drafted there, and my son's high school teammate Xavier Valladay is I think he's an underrated player in the NFL. Too. But
I like Xavier Valladay.
Yeah, it's nice seeing him play every week, every Friday night at Brother Rice High School in Chicago. So, but this whole team just got like it's just terrible. I got thrown in the back of the garbage truck together. A couple good players here are going to get released from this team and land up in pretty good spots in the NFL. But for me, Braylon Allen was my worst landing spot as far as that goes. JT, real fast, how about you?
There's quite a few. I agree with both your guys. That would have been my quarterback and running back takes. I'm going to throw in a wide receiver just because I like him, and I was taking him in all kinds of drafts, and now I'm just like a little worried. And that's Jacob Cowing from Arizona going to the Niners. I don't hate the Niners as a landing spot. I'm just worried about how he fits in there unless they move some guys. So they took Persall in the first round, so that bothers me a little bit. I'm like, so they already took him in the first, and they waited all the way till late to take Cowing. Cowing's a guy just for some reason I just think he can make it in the NFL. I think he's a guy that could be a good wide receiver too for somebody. He goes the last pick of the 4th round, so that was slightly disappointing there. I'm hoping he can do something, but my hoping and wishing is starting to fade unless something kind of crazy happens there in San Francisco.
Yeah. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. It means a lot for being on a Dynasty Evaluation show. Me and JT are here every week. Let everybody know where they can find you at. And, man, just keep up the awesomeness.
Hey, man, thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure to do this with you guys. And you can follow me at Matt Waldman on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. And you can find me at mattwaldman.com if you want to get the rookie scouting portfolio. You get a pre-draft and post-draft, which I'm working on right now. The post-draft part will be out probably by Friday or Saturday. You get both for $21.95. I also do dynasty rankings and projections for every player. And that's a service I make available starting in June in $24.95. You can find the details at mattwaldman.com. And we've given over $70,000 to an organization devoted to preventing sexual abuse of children called Darkness to Light, d2l.org. You can find out more about them there. And we'll be donating another $5,000 this year to them. And it'll put us over the $70,000 mark since we've been doing it since 2012.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, fellas.
Thank you. JT, real fast.
Yep, you can find me at JT Orange on the X on Twitter. Check out all my articles on DLF from the draft. Check that out. And Fantasy and Frames to tomorrow night, Wednesday night, check me out on the Shoot the Gap with Jorge. We're going to talk a little rookie IDP after we saw in the draft. So check me out there.
Thanks, Fantasy and Friends, for having us, and we'll see you later.